and welcome to this week's episode of Panel Discussion. Today's topic is on compensation to Mexico due to the Mexican-American War. Our guests today are some very important figures who are here to speak on the war. Let's welcome President James K. Polk, General Winfield Scott, and General Santa Anna.
It's great to be here.
Thanks for having me.
This should be good.
My first question is for President Polk and General Scott. What is it like in the United States before the Mexican-American War?
Well, there was an economic depression, yet the government's main focus was international affairs rather than internal improvements.
Interesting. What do you have to say, Mr. President?
Well, during the Tyler administration, America was at its worst. The Middle Passage had been outlawed, yet we weren't looking to stop smuggling people into our country. Britain got involved and set 135 enslaved Africans free from the Creole and strained relationships between our two nations. But we worked together to settle border controversies.
President Tyler also opposed protective tariffs, a national bank, and internal improvements. He didn't help with the economic depression, which was causing people to move west for a fresh start.
What took place when the Americans started moving west, General Santa Anna?
First, the American settlers bullied the Indians in the region. We already were having issues with them, but when the Americans came in and tried to confuse the Indian leaders into selling their land, it only aggravated them.
Are you kidding? We helped you Mexicans right off the Indians on the other side.
We didn't ask for your help, and it's your fault that the French were helping the Indians.
Yeah, it's our fault. You're the ones that started Catholic missions in Texas and Arizona. You put yourself in a bad situation. The Indians also had an alliance with the French, so you knew you would be at a disadvantage if you tried to force your religion upon them. Us Americans could have told you they wouldn't have given up easily.
We're getting off topic here. Back to the discussion. What happened when the Americans first encountered the Mexicans?
When we first encountered the Mexicans, we had an expansionist, Senor Cass, from Michigan. He told the Mexicans that we didn't want to have any issues or physical problems. We just wanted a portion of their land.
Well, that turned out to be a lie.
People who lived there were mostly mestizos, and most of them were low-end farmers.
What happened once the French took over Spain and imprisoned their king?
All the Spanish colonies were suddenly in chaos.
Miguel Hidalgo convinced us and the Indians to work together. He believed that if we seized the opportunity to revolt, then we could gain our independence from the Spanish government.
He did such a great job. Miguel organized it in such an inexperienced way. He failed miserably and was executed.
Although he had a tragic death, this inspired us to keep revolting years later.
Well, they got lucky. The Spanish officials became tired and morally defeated. So they just gave up. The Mexicans, they had their freedom.
How were the Mexicans once they got their freedom?
Their government sucked.
But the economy was very effective.
Thanks to us.
American fur traders went into New Mexico and Arizona and also had a successful commerce of beaver pelts. And suddenly there was a gigantic population of Americans in Mexican territory.
Who were the mountain men?
Oh, they are fur traders who were the first to find their way around the Rocky Mountains.
Us Americans continued to expand west and eventually reached California.
Franciscans converted Indians and relied heavily on agriculture.
Let's transition into the fight over Texas. When the Americans first started to settle in Mexico, how did that make you feel?
At first, I was indifferent because it was a way to stabilize the border. Once Stephen F. Austin became colonized the Brazos River, it gave the Americans an excuse to come into Texas. It was only a little bit invasive at first.
When the Americans really started to come into Texas, did they respect your culture or did they try to make it like their own?
Well, at first we were pretty open to having them. They started coming in larger numbers and bringing their African slaves. This showed us that they had no respect at all for our culture, considering we were opposed to slavery in general.
True at all.
Actually, it is. You Americans who were illegal immigrants came and outnumbered the Mexicans, and then they had the audacity to demand that they have representation in our government.
Mr. President, what did you think of the man with all of the power in Mexico? General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna.
Well, I thought he was a dictator, to say the least. He seized power, did not grant the Americans' request to have power in the Mexican government, expelled all Americans from Texas, and when the fighting started, men from the Southern American states came to help their fellow Americans who were being oppressed by him.
That's not true at all. I thought that I was a good leader who stood up for the rights of my citizens. You Americans made me seem like a bad guy.
Settle down, guys. Once the tension started to rise, were there any significant battles?
In my opinion, the most famous battle was the Alamo. The Americans were defending the Alamo, and I demanded that my soldiers fire a cannon at them. We launched several attacks over 12 days.
The American soldiers ran low on ammo, and the Mexicans broke through the north wall, killing all the men, leaving only the women and the children.
Later on, American delegates in Texas signed a Declaration of Independence, then fought and won against General Santa Anna's troops.
Go America!
A Tennessee frontiersman, Sam Houston, became president of the Lone Star Republic.
What exactly was the Lone Star Republic?
It was awful. The Americans legalized slavery and had a ban on free slaves. I still can't believe that Britain and France had a trade system with them. And even worse, the prices were lower on land, so Americans were drawn to it.
What did Americans think about Texas joining the Union?
The idea of adding Texas to the Union was quite popular among the American citizens.
As Americans, we thought it was strange that leaders in both political parties wanted to keep the divisive topic out of the 1844 presidential campaign.
Who were the candidates during the 1844 election, and what were their thoughts?
Henry Clay, who was part of the Whig Party, and Martin Van Buren, who was a Democrat. Both men opposed the annexation of Texas because they thought the debate over the topic would provoke a civil war.
The Whig platform also omitted any reference to Texas. Former President Van Buren's Southern supporters abandoned his effort to gain the nomination because of his opposition to Texas annexation. The convention was in a deadlock, so the expansionist forces nominated me.
What did your campaign like? Okay. What was your campaign like, and how did the other candidates respond to your platform?
My platform promoted territorial expansion, called for the reoccupation of Oregon and the re-annexation of Texas.
Democratic combo of Southern and Western expansionism constituted a winning strategy that forced Clay to hedge statement on Texas. Clay still believed the integrity of the Union to be chief consideration. He said he had no personal objection to the annexation, but only if it could happen without dishonor, without war, and without common consent of the Union, and upon just and fair terms.
Clay's explanation seemed clear, but was no match for spread eagle oratory and emotional pull of Manifest Destiny.
What is Manifest Destiny?
It's the idea that expansion of the Americas was justifiable and inevitable. It was expected for America to expand west. This led to Western settlement and the War with Mexico.
Interesting. What happened, President Polk, after you were elected?
Well, I was one of the few presidents to accomplish all of my major objectives.
President Polk adhered to Jackson's principles, but President Polk and the new Jacksonian subtly reflected the growing influence of the slaveholding South on the Democratic Party. Polk also said that the abolitionism could destroy the Union, but his pro-slavery stance further fragmented public opinion.
Anti-slavery Northerners began to drift away from the Democratic Party, which was perceived as representing the slaveholding interest in the South.
Although Polk was a poor diplomat, he was a formidable leader. His major objectives were a reduction of tariffs, reestablishment of the federal independent treasury, settlement of the Oregon boundary dispute with Britain, and the acquisition of California from Mexico.
Thank you. In 1864, I passed the Walker Tariff, which lowered tariff rates. I also convinced Congress to restore the independent treasury, which the Whigs had eliminated. My biggest concern was the geographical expansion.
Before Polk took office, the acquisition of slaveholding Texas was already started. President Tyler, who took Polk's election as a mandate to act, asked Congress to accomplish annexation by joint resolution. On March 1st, 1845, Tyler signed the resolution offering to admit Texas to the Union. Texas joined the Union December 29th, 1845.
The highlight of this panel discussion is the Mexican War. President Polk, General Scott, and General Santa Anna, what were your roles during the war and your opinions about what was going on?
I think where the war really starts is on March 6, 1845, when the Mexican government broke off relations with the U.S.
When negotiations with the Mexican government failed, I ordered troops under General Zachary Taylor to take up positions along the Rio Grande.
Mexico didn't recognize the U.S. annexation of Texas or the Rio Grande boundary between itself and Texas.
My intentions were clear. I wanted to goad the Mexicans into a conflict in order to secure Texas and obtain New Mexico and California.
President Polk resolved that he could achieve his purpose only by force. He won the cabinet's approval of a war message to Congress.
On May 9, 1846, news arrived that Mexicans had killed U.S. soldiers north of Rio Grande. 11 Americans were killed, 5 wounded, and the rest were taken prisoner.
In War Message, President Polk seized high ground, declaring that the use of force was a response to Mexican aggression.
Was there a lot of support for the war in the Union?
Yes. In the Mississippi River Valley, where expansion fever ran high, the war was very popular. President Polk's aggressive actions in Texas gained widespread support from rabid expansionists.
Oh, what was the American military like compared to the Mexican military?
Our military was small and inexperienced. The Mexican military, however, was large and unenthusiastic. The American military was not disciplined and did bad things, but they got the job done in battle.
And General Santa Anna, what do you think?
I have to agree with President Polk.
Where did the war take place?
The war happened in southern Texas, central Mexico, New Mexico, and California.
We haven't talked much on California. Tell me about that.
President Polk tried to buy the land in California from us, but we wouldn't budge. So then he planned a revolt among the American citizens living in California at the time.
They won and founded the Independent Republic of California, which we brought into this union quickly.
This was done with little resistance.
And the conquest of Mexico?
I appointed General Zachary Taylor, who grew popular after conquering northern Mexico provinces. His popularity later made him a political threat.
But related to the Mexican-American War, what was Taylor's role?
Well, his army went head-to-head against the Santa Annas.
The Americans forced me out of power early in the war, and I fled from Mexico. They were foolish enough to let me come back, giving me the opportunity to take control of my army again.
We let you back to discuss a way to end the war.
Nevertheless, I took control again and tried to win the land back, but neither of our armies were very good, and no one really advanced.
The war would have gone on much longer if I hadn't come in. Launching the first major amphibious military operation our country has seen, we fought near Veracruz, and I won.
The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed when we gave up Texas and California to the Americas in exchange for $15 million.
Does America owe Mexico?
I don't think so. No, I do think so, actually.
Nope.
You guys took land.
We do not. We paid
We
you guys
really
$15 million.
Okay,
And
that's
if you,
all for this week. See you later.
America.